I'm Dr. Pam King, and you're listening to With and For, a podcast that explores the depths of psychological science and spiritual wisdom to offer practical guidance towards spiritual health, wholeness, and thriving on purpose. Welcome back to With and For. I'm Dr. Pam King, and I'm so honored you're listening. Today, I'm going to walk through 6 facets of spiritual health that I've identified out of over 2 decades of research in positive developmental psychology. I'm definitely putting on my Professor King hat today and going to teach and share a bit about the research that I've been doing. I'm going to cover why spirituality is actually a really effective antidote to so much of the anxiety, vitriol, conflict, languishing, and even despair that we encounter in our own lives and witness in the world around us today. We'll also pause after each facet to consider together some practical dimensions that you can investigate yourself as you listen today. And if you're interested in diving deeper, I invite you to check out our website at thethrivecenter.org. Explore the many resources and some of the research that we have on the 6 facets of spiritual health, and sign up for Thrive's newsletter that features a variety of research-backed insights, practical exercises, and support for your own thriving life. It's one thing to talk about thriving and learn about thriving, but ultimately, we have to practice thriving. Also, if you didn't catch it last week, I'm very excited to announce that our official Season 2 begins January 6, 2025. So if you're not a subscriber to the With and For podcast, hit that button in your favorite podcast listening app and join us this fall for fresh episodes as we journey towards Season 2. And one of my practices when we're recording the podcast is imagining who's out there listening. We've got a growing community of people dedicated to growth and personal development and purpose and thriving. And I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to us through our socials, which you can find in the show notes. Say hi, let me know what's connecting with you, what's resonating, what you're working on, what you're struggling with. I'd love to hear that from you. Now we'll jump in. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through a framework for assessing, understanding, and growing in your own spiritual health. It's based on 25 years of my research in developmental psychology and the science behind human spirituality. And it's really the foundational infrastructure of the work at the T.H.R.I.V.E Center and informs every episode and conversation that you will hear on With and For. So in a moment, we'll jump in with some thoughts about the state of spiritual health today. Really, the situation actually seems dire to me, and how a grounded approach to spirituality or faith is really the antidote. Then I'll spend the rest of the episode addressing each of the 6 facets of spiritual health. The first is transcendence in spirituality. The second is habits and rhythms. The third is relationships and community. The fourth is identity and narrative. The 5th, vocation and purpose. And the 6th has to do with ethics and virtues. For each of these, I want to explain Thrive's unique approach to understanding how they fit into a thriving life of growth, resilience, meaning, and wholeness. I'll also emphasize that this kind of thriving contributes to our collective flourishing, not just focusing on individual self-help. And that's why I named the podcast With and For, because thriving involves our becoming our wholest, fullest, best selves with others and for a greater purpose. At the end of each segment, I'll invite you to pause and reflect on some key questions that can open up new paths to insight and growth. Something practical you can do today as you listen or save and revisit later. As humans, as people, we absolutely need spirituality. All of us could at some point hit a wall and realize we've reached the end of ourselves. We all know we need love, we need connection, and sometimes humans just let us down. And it's essential that we have resources of love beyond ourselves, that we have ways of making sense of this world, that we have ways of finding ourselves, finding direction and purpose. And frankly, it's hard in a very fragmented and chaotic and ever-changing world. We're all very aware that we are living in precarious times. Anxiety feels like it's part of the atmosphere. We have a heightened awareness to how our own habits of technology use are sabotaging us. They're sabotaging our attention, our relationships, especially for young people. We're aware of threat of climate change and weather chaos. We're aware of polarization and being on the brink of national elections. There's a lot going on in the world that gives us a sense of unrest and dis-ease, and that is showing up in a lot of mental health disease. In the research that continues to come out on demographics and how people are shifting their religious affiliation or their spiritual beliefs or their spiritual practices, one reality is that we're seeing that people are feeling unmoored. They're feeling disconnected. They don't know what they're tethered to. And with that, there is paralysis of people who lack meaning and direction. They lack a sense of community that can support them in their deepest held values. Spirituality is a crucial antidote to these habits and patterns of anxiety and anxiety-producing behaviors that we have fallen into. I use the word spirituality a lot, and I want to let you know what I mean by that. Spirituality is our experience of and our response to transcendence. And that second verb is really important. People often think of spirituality as a feeling, as a sense of connection, maybe an awareness to something beyond the self, to God, a higher power, an ultimate source of being. But it's also our response. And when we experience something extremely meaningful that has a sense of ultimacy, that is boundless, whether that is God or some sense of eternal, perhaps nature, it actually changes the way we see ourselves in the world. It reorients us and provides us meaning. And in a lot of places, spirituality and especially religion are being questioned. They can cause a lot of harm, shame in some instances, violence in others. People feel hurt or rejected, shamed, or marginalized by their religious communities, and they don't feel like they fit in or have a place. Spirituality and religion have been exploited over the years. We've seen great harm done at personal levels, at cultural levels, and that's terrible. But there's so much good. In these observations of how spirituality can go so wrong, I'm emphatic about emphasizing that spirituality has to be centered on love. When it's weaponized to shame people, to denigrate people, to exclude, or to become exclusive, that's not based on love. When it's shallow and self-serving and for a thrill or a buzz, that's not true spirituality. Spirituality is deeply rooted in love, enables us to receive and experience love from beyond ourselves, and enables us and invigorates us to live out love as ourselves. So this work of spiritual health feels more timely than ever. It's important that we take a look through a psychological lens to how spirituality can be helpful to us as people and also helpful to us as a society. And our spiritual health framework walks you through and orients you to practices and areas to consider that will really help you begin to weave together a life worth living. And fundamentally for us, that has to do with thriving with and for others. I listen to a lot of podcasters, influencers, and thought leaders, and I hear people speak to the power of spirituality, how spirituality is so important, but I often don't hear what they mean by spirituality or what to do about that. And Thrive wants to take you there. We offer you practical ways that you can pursue your faith, your religion, or your spirituality. And we're doing that from a psychologically informed background, because we want you to pursue spiritual health and thrive. And you can find the spiritual health framework at thethrivecenter.org. And on the graphic, that's a 6-faceted lens highlighting each of these facets of spiritual health. You can click on it and it will take you to a hub of resources on each facet. You can find this at thethrivecenter.org. I love alliteration, rhymes, how words fit together. And so the 6 facets of our framework spell out the word thrive. The first facet is transcendence and spirituality. This facet has to do with having an awareness of and connection to a source of invigorating love that inspires purpose. In some of my earliest research, one of the most intriguing findings to me was the role of transcendence in people's lives, and particularly how they make meaning and forge a sense of identity. I heard story after story of how people experience transcendence in many different ways. For some people, it might be an answered prayer. It might be being aware of and feeling the presence of God with you. At times, people might be in awe by a sunset and be ignited to think about the Creator or the deep connection between nature and ourselves. Beauty can arouse us. Worship can elevate our senses, where we experience something that is way beyond us. For others, sometimes it's contemplating on truth, finding beauty in rationality, finding beauty in scripture. People experience transcendence in very different ways. One profound way that many people experience transcendence is through music. And yes, there is that very arousing experience of music at a concert when you're dancing and you can feel the beat of the drum surging through your body. That may or may not be a transcendent experience, but it is definitely elevating. But when we connect experiences with meaning, with how we order our life, with that which matters most, those are truly transcendent experiences. And so sometimes if I need a lift, I might listen to certain music that points me beyond myself, that points me towards my deepest convictions, that remind me in my review of God and God's love for me. Transcendence is important because it is invigorating. It's emotional as well as mind-opening. And for all of us in our spiritual journeys, it's important that we seek moving experiences, whether that is through worship and feeling connected and in sync with others, whether it is through art or beauty that moves us beyond ourselves and points to a source of meaning or a creator beyond ourselves. But transcendence is very important to our vitality and invigorating a sense of devotion and commitment to a belief system and an identity and the way we live our lives. So what does this have to do with your life? Here are some questions for you to consider and investigate about transcendence and spirituality in your own life. Do you feel cared for and loved by God or a higher power? Or is God or a higher power a source of shame and guilt for you? Do you have practices, whether daily or weekly or monthly, that enable you to experience awe or that bring you a sense of joy or contribute to a sense of meaning in your life? The second facet is habits and rhythms. Habits and rhythms have to do with healthy spiritual practices and regular rhythms that allow us to slow down, to gain insight, connect to love, and energize us into purposeful endeavors. They actually engage our whole selves, our thoughts and our beliefs, our emotions, and our behaviors. And habits and rhythms are so important because they are what form us and change us. When I think of categories of practices, I think of those that help us regulate, whether that's our attention and focus, our emotions, or even regulate our life goals. I also think of practices that enable us to relate to people, that help us cultivate compassion and empathy, that slow us down to be able to be aware of one another, not just ourselves. And in addition to regulation and relating is reflecting. So practices that pause us enable us to reflect on our most important values, how our days are going, what matters most to us. And so in spiritual health, we invite you to put together a composition of practices that helps you regulate, helps you grow in your relational skills, and helps you reflect on your life. And one of the things I'm most excited about in our work is that there is so much research on practices these days that we offer insight into how some traditional spiritual practices, like prayer, might be more impactful for you and technically the world if you slow them down a bit or create some more rigorous patterns around them. We also highlight that there are sacred rhythms of being human. Rest in Sabbath, celebrating, elevating our emotions is also important. Playfulness is also a rhythm we need in life. So these are all things that we consider part of spiritual health. Now, some questions to consider about your habits and rhythms and practices in your life. First, do you have regular rhythms of rest or Sabbath? Do you intentionally practice regulating your emotions? Do you engage your body in spiritual practices like breathing, walking meditations, or singing? The third facet, R, is for relationships and community. And this has to do with connections that provide a space of belonging where we can be fully known to ourselves and others and learn to give and receive love. Relationships and community are essential to our spiritual health. The individualistic approaches to spirituality that I see growing are concerning because we are relational beings and we are created to be in relationships. We grow when we encounter love. We need people by whom we're known, who we're cared for, and who we know and can care for. Spiritual health is no exception because as humans, we grow when we feel loved, when we are known, seen, understood, when we know we matter. Our brains relax and we're able to grow, to be more creative, to try new things. And so this practically looks like at least having one person in your life who gets you and can share your spiritual convictions and encourage you in that journey. But ideally, there's a community to whom you can belong. As human beings, we have a deep longing to belong, to know who we're a part of. We not only need the active encouragement and affirmation of others, but we thrive when we help others thrive, and we need to be involved and engaged with others, supporting them in their journey as well. And now, a couple questions about relationships and community in your life to help you reflect on where things stand for you. Do you have an actual spiritual community or a group of people that support you in your spiritual journey, in which you feel known, loved, and supported? Do you know and respect people who practice their faith differently from you? The fourth facet is identity and narrative. And this facet has to do with growing in clarity about who we are as beloved, unique, and embodied people, and how we relate to others and the greater world. This informs the evolving narrative that we tell about our lives, about who we are, who we belong to, how we relate to others, what gives us meaning, and where our lives are headed. Perhaps in this day and age where we are bombarded and confronted by so many narratives, so many stories, it is harder to get a clearer sense of our identity. For many of us, we feel like we belong or are part of many people and nothing at all. We might have a sense of connection to an ethnic community, a neighborhood, a sports team, a religion, a Facebook group, a favorite influencer. But in so many ways, our identities are spread so thin, it's hard for us to have a cohesive story about our lives. Spiritual health invites you into a journey of clarifying who you are, whose you are, what your life's about, and where you're going. We are unique people. We have unique strengths. We have unique weaknesses. But the reality is, when it comes to identity, context matters. Our identity is not just informed by who we are as unique people, but it is who we belong to, our place in the world, how we contribute beyond ourselves, and how we find meaning. We are not isolated individuals, and spiritual health invites us to navigate our identity with a deep sense of connection to the world around us. Often people feel like spirituality is an inner journey of finding their true self. Psychologically, we realize we don't exist without one another. And so there is no static, absolute true self. But we are people that find identity in our relationship with God, with the sacred, with one another. And consequently, I love the word narrative, because when we consider the evolving narrative of our life, we can highlight who we are as unique people, experiences that we've had that have changed us, and the people that we are responsible to, accountable to, and that encourage us. For example, as human beings, we come to know ourselves initially through our earliest relationships with our families, our caregivers. And as we grow as people, we discover ourselves only in relationship with those around us and into the greater world. A lot of the research that I've done reveals that when people have transcendent beliefs, a transcendent orientation in their narrative, when there's something beyond the self that gives them meaning and hope and direction, these are people who thrive. They know what their life's about. They know who they're connected to. And they also have a sense of being beloved. And so if there's a takeaway from this facet, my hope for you is that you would think about your own story, who you are as a unique person with all your beauty, with all your brokenness, but knowing that you are beloved. And as you think about living your story forward, seek out that and those which enable you to know and experience and live out your being beloved. Healthy spirituality offers practices that encourage you to reflect on the sense of identity and being a beloved person and how you live out love in the world. All right, let's look inward again. Get curious about yourself and ask some questions about your own identity and narrative. Do you consider your life as part of a bigger story? And if so, what is that bigger story telling? And how do you understand your role in that story? How do you actively seek to understand who you are and who you are becoming? How do you understand whose you are and whose lives you contribute to? The fifth facet is vocation and purpose, which has to do with our contributing our strengths to the world by living out our response to love. One of the most powerful aspects of spirituality is that spiritual beliefs offer us a sense of purpose. Sometimes we call this a calling or a vocation. Spiritual beliefs point us to purposes beyond ourselves. Psychological research reveals that when people have a purpose that is bigger than themselves, that is noble, that uses and engages your greatest desires and strengths in a way that contributes beyond you and makes a difference for others, that purpose is very life-giving. And so when we have a transcendent worldview, we understand how our lives are part of a much bigger story than ourselves. And when we know the role that we play in that story, that's where we begin to find our purpose. A few things that are important to understand about purpose is they're not necessarily your job or your profession. They have to do with who you are in your relationships. They have to do with your character and the person you're becoming as well. So when you think about purpose, you want to think about your strengths, the people you want to serve and the people you love, and who you're becoming. And also important to keep in mind that purpose doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be curing cancer. Some of us find our purposes in very everyday things. And secondly, what's so important about purpose is that it enables us to make the mundane and quotidian actions and behaviors that we do, like washing dishes, purposeful. When I understand chores around the house that I have to do, as part of my purpose is being a mom and caring for and providing for my family, I enjoy them a lot more. Spirituality invites us to consider the greater purposes of our life and enables us to be mindful about how we connect our daily actions to those greater purposes. Now, consider your vocation and purpose, just from the perspective of the moment you're in right now, wherever you are, driving, walking, doing dishes. Do your beliefs, whether spiritual, existential, philosophical, do they give you and motivate a sense of purpose in your life? If so, how? Another really important question about purpose is, how do you seek to contribute your gifts and talents to the greater good in this world? The last facet is ethics and virtues, the E of Thrive. Ethics and virtues have to do with our beliefs about love and how we live out love through our values, through our views of right and wrong, and by cultivating virtuous habits. One of the surprising realities in research about a thriving life is having a moral compass. When we don't know what's right or wrong, when we don't have a sense of what matters, when we don't have guides that help us treat others well, our lives feel like they lack integrity and substance, and we don't get that sense of thriving. When we have a clearer sense of our ethics and what's right, and when we habituate them in virtues, when we automatically can act morally, that brings a lot of substance and depth to our life. And when we've had a chance to reflect on them, even though they're always updating and evolving, and we do make habits out of being compassionate, out of being kind, when we habituate curiosity and joy and gratitude, this adds so much to our life. Healthy spirituality engages us in how we understand the world from a moral and ethical perspective, and offers us practices that enable us to become the people we desire to be, that enable us to cultivate things like compassion and kindness that do bring us joy and make our life more worth living. We all long to be good people. Being virtuous sounds great, but when it comes down to it, it can be hard. We might have ideals and beliefs about forgiveness, but it can be hard to forgive people. We might think patience is a virtue, but we're walking into a heated election. It can be hard to be patient or compassionate with people who see the world differently than you do. So healthy spirituality invites us into practices that cultivate habits that enable us to be virtuous and to be good people in situations that are complex. How does spiritual health enable us to live out love? It's one thing to talk about love. Sounds good. It's another thing to live it out. And again, let's ask these questions of ourselves with open-mindedness and self-compassion about the role of ethics and virtues in our lives. Does your spirituality or your faith actually guide and impact how you treat others? Do you seek to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult? We all want to thrive. We all want to experience the fullness of life. We want to become whole. That is not easy work, especially in a world that is filled with chaos, change, more anxiety than I'd like. But we are fortunate. We have tools that can help us forge our way, keep grounded with ourselves and who we are and our values and beliefs, keep connected to others, those who support us, those who we support and care for, and keep us directed towards our purposes. But they do take effort. And the spiritual health framework provides a lens through which you can see both the challenges and opportunities in this world, and offers you practices that can become habits that will give you the clarity and focus that you need to navigate life's challenges so that you not only thrive, but also you can enable those around you to become their most whole selves, and that you can live and lead in this world in a way that brings about more joy, peace, and goodness. One of the most important takeaways for me of pursuing spirituality, whether it's my own personal faith perspective or spirituality more generally, is that we're all in this together. And I think in this moment in history and in this time with so much dis-ease, so much fear, and so much anxiety, we need one another. It is who we are as humans. We don't thrive alone. And spiritual health enables us to not just focus on our own thriving, but how we can contribute to a flourishing world. And perhaps at no time than any other, we need that. As humans, we're in this together, and we need to be with and for each other. Spiritual health is a practical way that one can find resources within themselves, beyond themselves, in partnership with others, that enables us to live our lives more fully, not just for ourselves, but for others. I've been really looking forward to welcoming you behind the scenes and to share some of our foundational principles of thriving in spiritual health. Each facet is meant to offer a different look into the depth and beauty and sometimes brokenness of our personal faith journeys, our religious practices, and our spiritual lives. For each of us, this is a long journey, a deep well, or perhaps feels like a vast and open sky. And I hope that these give you a sense of groundedness and steadiness and curiosity about how to take some simple steps today towards healthy spirituality for yourself and also to offer it to your community. Again, head over to our website at thethrivecenter.org to explore the 6 facets of spiritual health for yourself. Our website is full of educational resources, psychological research, theological reflection, exercises and spiritual practices, and much more. Thank you so much for joining me today. We really look forward to hearing from you. I'd love to hear what's on your mind, what resonated, what you're curious about, what you might like to hear more about. In the meantime, pick a practice from our website or a question from the episode, and wish you joy in your thriving journey. See you next time. With and For is a production of the T.H.R.I.V.E Center at Fuller Theological Seminary. For more information, visit our website, thethrivecenter.org, where you'll find all sorts of resources to support your pursuit of wholeness and a life of thriving on purpose. I am so grateful to the staff and fellows of the T.H.R.I.V.E Center and our With and For podcast team. Jill Westbrook is our senior director and producer. Lauren Kim is our operations manager. Ren Jurgensen is our social media graphic designer. Evan Rosa is our consulting producer. And special thanks to the team at Fuller Studio and the Fuller School of Psychology and Marriage and Family Therapy. I'm your host, Dr. Pam King. Thank you for listening.